I want to thank everybody for coming here. My name is Russell Curley. I'm a member of the Levittown Historical Society. I'm also Vice President of the South Shore Volunteer Firemen Association. I'm a member of Town of Babylon Fire Police. I'm a life member of the East Farmingdale Fire Department. And I was originally a member of Babylon Village. And we live in 11 home in East Farmingdale, so I've always taken a big interest with Levittown history. I first learned about this fire going back to 1995. I know some members in the Levittown Fire Department, and he gave me a color picture of the St. Bernard's Church fire. And I asked him, when did this happen? And he mentioned it happened on Memorial Day, right in the afternoon on Hempstead Turnpike. Before this church was built, and right before Levittown was built, Nassau Airport was a private airport. It was right around the same land when it was mainly all potato fields. And it was bought over by the Catholic Diocese from Brooklyn, and they built the St. Bernard Church going back to 47 or 48. Being a very popular church, people said a lot of good things about the church. And from what I learned about the fire, although I've never been able to prove it, they said a girl accidentally started the fire with the candle. And took a couple of fire departments to help them put it out. Wantor and Bethpage later responded to this fire. Luckily there was no fatalities, but there was some major damage. And after they opened it up, as the years go by, they were doing some renovations. They found that a lot of stuff from the ceiling was falling off. That suffered structural damage from the fire, but nobody noticed it. So eventually they tore it down, rebuilt the church, and it's now the church as you see it today. The fire that you see at this church is not the same building or the same design when they first built this back in the 40s. Now we'll go to one of the pictures. When Levittown Ladder 6 arrived at the scene, they were getting their ladders operation, getting it all set up. There's a fire, you can see the smoke starting to push up pretty well. And if you look at the jackets they wore back in the days, you can tell back then they wore heavy black gear with their helmets, and you were able to put your own boots on. Now today you got the gears with the straps over them, just put your legs in. And most of the gear is now yellow. It's not like the old black gears that we wore back in the 60s and 70s. I'll go to the next picture. This picture was taken by Roger Stegner the day of the fire. And this was the front of the church in the early stages of the fire. You can see there's a lot of heavy smoke coming out of there. So, but they were getting the ladder operation. They moved pretty quick. I think they did a great job with the quick attack they had on this fire. And yes, there was a lot of damage, but they got there pretty quick and they started operations real quick.
You got it.
Thanks.
Great.
This was one of the trucks that was with the Levittown. I'm sorry if it's a little blurry because I extended the picture. This one was a 1966 Maxim that belonged to Rescue 4. It was an open cab pumper at the time. It could either put out fires or they could do heavy rescue operations. And this was taken out of parade in Hicksville, which I understand was in either the late 60s or the 70s, but this truck was at the fire that day. This also was taken by Roger Stegner. This appears to be the back of the church. If you look at, there's a fence there, and you can tell this wasn't at the front of the fire. And you see they have ladders set up to, cut holes if they have to, and it's what you call a ventilation. And once again, you can see the old jackets. And the guy you see wearing a white helmet, that was one of the Levittown chiefs that was in charge of the fire operations. I don't know who was chief back then, but that was one of their chiefs. This is the color version. By then they got their operations all set up. Now I'm going to give you guys a quiz. Who's the guy with the red hair and the checkered shirt? Was it? Huh?
Opie.
Close, but no cigar. He's standing right behind him. That's Paul Manton. He was at the fire that day. This was one of the ladder trucks that responded to this fire. Although this was a bit of a different fire. This is ladder 6, which was the first two ladder, as you notice, responded to the fire. This was a 68 Maxim Tiller ladder. They had this for 16 years, replaced it with a rear mount. And if you look at the picture that says Ramblers used cars, and you look at how McDonald's looked back in the days, this was at a fire at McDonald's going back to 1969.
What
Yeah,
location?
McDonald's was still there in 69.
Where? What location?
This
Same place where it is now.
Next to the Rambler would have been Honda City, when that was vacant.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so now today it is vacant.
Yeah, and Pergaments were right behind it, right?
Yep. Here's another action. The ladder's now is already in, almost in operation. Now, anybody remember those old street lights back in the days?
Yeah.
You don't see those around anymore. And this would be Levittown's Engine 2, which was actually the first new engine that responded from the Hickory Lane firehouse. Engine 2 and fire is up on the north end. Engine 3 and ladder 1 is at headquarters, and ladder 6 and engine 7 is on the Wandsworth Avenue firehouse. And now today they got 3 ambulances. Well, I hate to say this, ironically, you'll never believe this, 50 years later, history repeated itself. On May 2020, it was happened on Thursday afternoon, my son fought in this fire. He was a captain in the East Farmingdale Fire Department. They had a fire at a church called Our Lady of Assumption in Copeg. They called about 11 fire departments because it was a weekday fire, and it's hard to get members showing up because many people work during the day. And from what my son told me, they were there till like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. If you look at this fire that they have there, it went right through the roof. It was, and to this day, they haven't fixed the church yet at all. I understand they're trying to raise some money, and of course the pandemic hasn't really helped either. And yeah, right now it's still a vacant building. The church today, I understand many people still go to it on Sunday. I don't know of any other fires they may have had at the St. Bernard. This is the one in 1970 is the only one I remember. I had heard some stories a couple of months later, the 3000 building, although I don't have any pictures. I've heard they've had some pretty bad fires over there, which is not too far from the St. Bernard's.
Yeah, I remember that.
There's another angle, which the back of the building, with the another ladder truck from Bethpage. And back in the days, a lot of spectators would get close to the fire and check it out, see how bad it was. Now today, with all these OSHA rules and stuff, we do a lot to keep the crowds back because, God forbid, if one of them gets injured, then they turn around and they'll sue the fire department and all that stuff, and we gotta be responsible for our crowd patrol, because I do fire police with my local fire department. There was another early stage of the fire where they were setting up ladder operations. That's probably the best close-up picture you'll get of the church.
Russ, what was the response time between the time somebody called in the fire and the time?
Well, usually, I would say 6 to 7 minutes, or they might have been in the midst of the parade, but apparently I understand the fire happened after the parade.
Yeah, well, that's what I always wondered too, because there was a parade going on that day, although it was a little bit earlier in the day. But that's why I was down there on my bicycle to watch the parade and just kind of hung out, and then all of a sudden I see this commotion.
Yeah, it was, I think it was a pretty hot day if I recall. Now here's a very interesting rig. The reason why I added this picture, this was a rare rig. It was transported patients to the hospital, and this was a '69 Cortez. Back in the days, a lot of fire departments used the old Cadillac ambulance, where it was, back in the days, it was race like hell to get to the hospital and get there as quick as you can. This ambulance had a lot of room. The only other fire department that had one like this was Montauk out east on the island. Yeah, this was a very rare rescue vehicle, but that was at the fire that day when the church went up. That one was out of headquarters. That's one toward Levittown's ambulance community.
Oh.
Back in the day, it was white on the top, blue on the bottom. Weird looking color combination. Towards the end, as you can see by now, they basically had the fire put out. And the other aerial ladder that's right next to Levittown, they also got this in 1968. That's one towards 1968 100-foot mid-mount American La France aerial ladder. So, well, those are my pictures that I posted for now. That was all I was able to collect. Like I say, no, luckily there was no fatalities. I don't even think there was even any injuries. Maybe a few hospitals may have went to the hospital for maybe smoke insulation, but for the most part, they did a great job extinguishing this fire. You can tell by looking at the community, there was a lot. You can see a lot of different stores that were around in '70, which is probably all gone now.